Welcome to the Andy Staples Show. And I got a text last week out of the blue that made me smile. It was from Max Olson. He linked a story in his text and he said, I got some takes on this. And I thought to myself, oh no, we have not done room temperature takes in a while, because when Max comes, he comes with the not hot, not blazing, not freezing, just right there in the sweet spot room temperature takes. So Max, in honor of you joining us and you and I exchanging room temperature takes today, I have made an official introduction for room temperature takes. So yeah,
I'm honored. Okay,
my production skills at work. Here we go.
The thing that I get the most satisfaction out of is just being not wrong. I just want to be not wrong.
It's room temperature takes with Max Olson.
We are not here to get ratioed today, Andy. That's what we're not here to do.
Too many flex bombs, not enough flex bombs. How we feel about the flex bombs?
I love it. This is to, if folks missed the first episode of this, when you're in the grocery aisle and you're reaching for a jar of salsa, you're reaching for the pace mild or medium. If you're listening to this pod,
that's exactly right.
You're not trying to challenge yourself. We're just a good old classic can of tomatoes and onions here.
You are going to come away from this saying that was a very pleasant experience.
I mean, I enjoy your arguments with Ari as much as anybody, and that's not what I'm trying to achieve here. We're trying to have a little harmony, and also my kid, we're taping this at night, and my kid's sleeping, so I can't be screaming, I can't be waking that kid up.
Exactly. Now Ari doesn't seem to care. Kids just sleeping, because this podcast between you and Ari is very much arranged around newborn naps. That's how we roll here.
The only difference with him and I is I'm just not like jet setting on vacations every weekend. Like I know he has a kid.
Yeah.
But his quality of life is still extremely high.
I never left the house unless it was for work.
Hell no.
when I had babies. Like I was not allowed to leave the house unless it was for work. So, all right, let's talk about this, because you texted me with this story last week and made a very interesting point. And this is one that made the rounds on the internet. It's a topic that we discussed a lot on the podcast. You and I discussed it a lot when it was hot early last month. And that is, it was a story from AL.com about Brian Harsin.
It was from the Montgomery Advertiser.
Oh, Montgomery Advertiser. I'm sorry. Gotta give the right outlet. So the Montgomery Advertiser writes a story about Brian Harsin and some Alabama high school coaches being miffed that Harsin has not been establishing, the kind of relationship that they would like the Auburn coach to establish with them. And some background: this is a historically good year in the state of Alabama for talent. I believe there are 11 top 100 players in the the 24/7 composite right now for the class of 2023. So great year for talent in Alabama. High school coaches complaining about Brian Harsin. And you made a great point to me, because I realize it is popular to pile on Brian Harsin right now.
Very much.
But
yeah.
Please give him the support he needs.
It's not really. I mean, look, this is not me standing for Brian Harsin. We can talk about why we don't think it's gonna work there, and you've talked about that plenty on this podcast as well. But the thing that stood out to me, and this was certainly is a well reported piece, and I'm not trying to take away anything from it, but I believe kind of the hook of it was that they talked to 14 Alabama high school coaches, and only 7 of them had met Brian Harsin so far, and that blew up a bit on Twitter, and I get why, because if you have kind of this, it's confirmation bias, right? Like if you already have this kind of sense that, just as as you wrote about like Dan Mullen last year, like if you think the guy's not cutting it in recruiting, then you're going and you read something to that effect, like you're going to say, yep, see, here's the proof this guy's blowing it. To me, Brian Harsin not getting in enough high school so far, to me, is like not really damning, because you still have to remember that in his first few months on the job, he couldn't go on the road. There was
right.
still
Any coach hired in late 2020 was not allowed to.
Right.
Any head coach couldn't travel until the fall of 2021.
And head coaches don't get to go on the road in April, May to go do those high school visits. And
yeah,
so,
you know who led the charge for that to get changed and force them off the road? An Auburn coach. Tommy Tuberville didn't want to chase Nick Saban around.
Small world. So that winter period is really important in terms of coaches getting out on the road, not just to finish your class, but then to get going on the next few. And Brian Harsin didn't get to have that. This is the first winter he got to have that, and obviously it was a tumultuous winter. While you're getting that important time out on the road. To me, the damn thing is not like getting in enough high schools. I think if you are starting from behind, if you know, man, we can't even really do in-person recruiting until it was June, right?
Yeah.
To me, like that, the correction there would need to be, how can I catch up by getting as many high school coaches as possible on my campus, having clinics, going to their events and award events and whatever you can go to. And I know that's been pointed out before that Harsin has missed some of those things that other SEC coaches don't miss. That to me is like kind of the more damning thing. But I'm not just trying to nitpick there, but I also think from covering recruiting back in the day a little bit too, like I think you've noticed year over year, the high school coach has less influence on a recruitment than ever before.
Now, I'm not sure Brian Harsin is going out and meeting the 7-on-7 coaches or the private trainers or the other people who are exerting a significant amount of influence these days.
Well, his son's a high school player, so he can go out to some of these things and actually
he can go to the events.
Folks. Yeah, that's right. And he did this weekend. But and I'm not trying to say high school coaches don't do anything for players. They absolutely do. But if you're talking about those kind of players that the blue chip players that Auburn needs to get, those coaches, those players are not going to their coach before signing day and saying, "Coach, where should I go?"
Right. There's somebody else is involved, and especially now more than ever. And I just think I at this point I just feel bad for Brian Harsin. Which he's being paid handsomely. I get it, but the internal sabotage that was attempted on him was below the belt, and it made a situation that was already bad that much worse. And I just I don't know.
But
I don't think it's
I know
work, but I hate to see it like this.
Sure. Now I know what stood out to you in that piece was the OKG's part of it, and I would like to talk about that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, so OKG is a term that Brian Harsin's former boss, Chris Peterson, used a lot. Rich Rodriguez would use it a lot too. It means our kind of guy. And basically, there's two schools of thought on it. One is it's coaches who evaluate really well, who know exactly who fits in their program. And the other school of thought is it's coaches who can't recruit elite talent, making an excuse for why they can't recruit elite talent.
I think
truth's in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's what we're going for in this podcast. Truth is in the middle, Andy.
Yeah.
I think that at Auburn, you can't go full OKG. You just can't.
No.
Like I think that at Kentucky you can and you should, and it's working.
But they're not.
But also they are still getting high level players.
Yeah, they've moved past OKG. Like Josh Allen and Snell were OKGs. You look at the class they signed this year, they've kind of progressed past
for sure. And as you win, you get to move up in the world in recruiting. But at a school like Kentucky, and that's just a random example there, but they pat you on the back and say like, "Holy crap, what an awesome job we're doing at developing here!" Right? I mean, that's the goal. That's the goal. At Auburn, like you can build classes different ways. And if you decide that the way to go at Auburn is to take 10 transfers a year, then like I'm not going to say that's the wrong way to go. But buddy, like you got to go get like some really, really good players in your region. You have to win the battles for those guys. And I think that you can't just say, well, I've won a lot of games with 3 stars and we're going to get the right 3 stars here. Because first of all, you're going to get fired before those 3 stars are juniors and seniors.
Yeah.
But also like you have to like respect, like with the last regime, like think about how much work it takes to get a Derek Brown on your team.
Yes.
It is very, very hard to do. And you have to make that effort if you're the coach at Auburn to get those kind of players there, as opposed to just saying, well, we're looking for a player that's less entitled and less hyped and will work harder and stuff. Like, no, you have to get really, really good guys there to have a chance in that division.
And Derek Brown, as good as he was, because he was every bit the talent he was purported to be in his recruitment, and a hard worker, and everything you'd want out of that. And it still wasn't good enough. They still wanted to fire Gus at the end of that 2019 season. Right. Like, I mean, no, you got not just one of those. You have to have bunches of those to win in the SEC.
You do. And I'm not trying to like delve into Stars Center here, but I think there's a middle ground to that where I think that I just don't think that with where things are at today, if you just took the temperature today, you would say, man, what is it going to take for Harsin to get to 23 with this job? And I don't know. I think you have to go big in recruiting now to just try and buy yourself time.
Yeah. I think like a lumber supply chain shortage might be the thing that does it. So something that restricts the amount of money that can be given to Auburn University for
the
that
cost of lumber purpose. Is just not in a great place right now.
It's not, but the question is, does the person selling the lumber make more because of that or less? If they get in a situation where they make less, then Harsin has a chance to potentially be safer. But no, it's just frustrating to me because they didn't have to make that public. They didn't have to do that to him. There didn't have to be all those rumors. Like that was dirty pool. It didn't need to be like that. If you don't like the guy, great. Buy him out. That's it.
Yeah, you can't really unpoison that well at this point.
Yeah. So that one was amazing to me. Now, here's another one where a coach got kept, and this is one I had last week in the Dear Andy column.
Okay.
Because I was asked about Scott Frost, and the question was basically, history's not on his side. What do I think is going to happen? And I wrote that while history may not be on Scott Frost's side, math might actually be on his side. And Jason Deloach at CFB Numbers did this amazing post in early February.
Yeah.
And I linked to it in that Dear Andy column. You can find it on my Twitter feed. You can go to @CFB Numbers. It's posted there. They simulated Nebraska's 2021 season 5,000 times using all the stats from all the teams on the schedule. How many times in the 5,000 simulations did Nebraska win 3 games? 2. They were most likely with that performance to win 6, 7, or 8. That was the kind of the sweet spot statistically. But they were much more likely to win 10 than they were to win 2. Or so than they were to win 3, given the parameters of the season. So they're not that far off. And I think what I got from the commenters in that story was, yes, but the mistakes were coaching mistakes, and that's why it won't work. We're going to find out. Like, the way they rewrote his contract, they give him 6 games basically, and the buyout drops after the 6th game of the season, and we'll see. We'll kind of know, but I'm curious because on Monday, you went out to a press conference featuring Scott Frost and all the new Nebraska assistants and some players. And what were your takeaways from that group getting a chance to talk?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is sort of there's a lot of aspects of this Nebraska 2022 run here that are going to be fascinating to watch and pretty unique. And a lot of times with a coach, when you're kind of on the fence about whether to make that move, sometimes the thing that can factor in that can be like, oh man, look at where the roster is at. Like, oh, they're really just like a year away, right? Sometimes you just look at it and you say, give them just a little bit more time. They're doing all the right things, and this is going to click here in the next year. We just have faith in this, that based on what they've got. They don't have a lot coming back, Andy, from last year, from this team that this team that really struggled, played in a ton of close games, but it's a really in terms of they lost a lot of super seniors. They lost several multi-year starters who went into the draft early. They lost obviously Adrian Martinez to Kansas State and replaced him with Casey Thompson. There's a lot of Chubba Purdy. That's right. Although Mark Whipple came out today and said Casey Thompson's the number one QB, and
Wow.
just straight up said it after the first practice. So he said that can change, but that's where they're at. This is not one where it's like kind of a run it back team. Like they are going to have to find a lot of new starters on that defense that was really good last year. They're going to have to find new starters on the O line, which was very bad last year. They need to find new playmakers. They need to have a whole starting quarterback battle. They have to figure out somebody who's leading that running back room. There's just a ton of question marks with this team, and not like a ton of and not like a ton of certainties. And on top of that, you've got a totally rebuilt offensive staff with one exception, trying to blend old ideas and new ideas. And man, there's just a lot of moving parts. And I think in this sport, as you've seen, sometimes when you've got a little bit too much of that, you're trying to achieve all in one year. You're going to have that maybe that 5 or 6 win kind of season.
Well,
but it's Nebraska, so the expectations by the end of August will be that this is an 8 or 9 win team.
Oh, of course.
The gap there is, potentially a problem.
Well, I've shared my theory with you on how that works with Nebraska. And it's for those who don't live in an area where the college football team is the biggest thing going. It's a little bit harder to understand because like if you're in a pro market, the coverage is going to trend toward critical and be either kind of even keeled or veer toward the negative. In most college markets, it's not as critical, but like in the SEC, it can get pretty critical just because the expectations are so high. But Nebraska, it is the biggest thing going. And so they've got to write about every single thing and talk about every single thing that happens with that team. Every aspect of that team will be explored. And obviously in an off season, you can't really be that negative because there aren't any negative facts. There are no losses to say, well, they did this wrong. They did this wrong. It's all optimism. And I feel like that just gets pumped up so high by the time the season starts. And then that first loss is just like, oh God, what now?
Yeah. There's a little bit of a disconnect there where you think that just like, okay, on paper, like they've got all these, and Frost even said it today, like, that's great if we've got pieces, but we need to turn this into a team.
Yeah.
And
every recruit is written about like they are the second coming of Scott Frost.
And the recruiting classes, even in the years they struggle in recruiting, are still like top 25.
Well, so the other thing is
a baseline expectation there.
Yeah. In defense of people writing about recruits, like who's going to trash a 17-year-old? Who's going to do that? So, yeah, of course it's going to get. I feel like it gets artificially pumped up there, and the expectations get too high. What is a reasonable expectation? That was the original question in the Dear Andy column was, what's a reasonable expectation for Frost to keep his job? What does he need? I think it's bowl eligibility. I feel like given what's happened, that represents progress.
Yeah, I think that certainly Trev Alberts and the people that have Scott Frost back spun 3-9 as glass half full, essentially, right?
And they're the best 3-9 team ever.
100%. And at a lot of places, absolutely, that does not get you another year. It just doesn't. I mean,
but their points for and points against in Big Ten play were dead even, and they were 1-8. Like that just shouldn't happen.
It's completely bizarre.
As the ball bounced the other way a bunch of times on you. That's what that's saying.
Well, and so this year, I guess this year we find out how much of that is on coaching and how much of it is on just talent and development problems and how much is luck. Yeah, how much is luck. But it's as you guys have said before, right? I mean, how many times do you dent the card before it stops being a coincidence? Right.
That's right.
How many more chances do you get? I love that
coming through.
But I think
tremendous.
I think part of it is people here still they didn't want Scott Frost fired. A lot of people didn't. I'm not saying most. Right. I'm not saying more than 50%. I don't know. I think people still really want to believe that the fantasy can become reality.
I understand that, and I also think nationally people don't quite understand where Nebraska people are at, because I think there's this image of Nebraska fans being obsessed with getting back to where they were in the 90s. Every Nebraska fan I interact with, they're under no illusion that they'll ever get back to where they were in the 90s. They just would like to have a nice, respectable program.
Yeah. Yeah. They right now, the bar has been lowered so much that, to get back to 8-9 wins a year would be just like tremendously satisfying, I think, to Nebraska fans. And, there's a larger discussion there, obviously, about like where, like, to me, I would say if you're a Nebraska fan, you should be praying for a 12-team playoff, because I don't know how you get into the 14 playoff in the next 10, 20 years.
Well, you might want to tell your league that, because although I do
right.
think once the Big Ten gets that new TV deal locked down, I think they'll be pretty amenable to any playoff with 6 at-larges, because that'll be good for the Big Ten.
Yeah, so. Yeah, that's the thing you got to cling to, is just the continued monetary success of the Big Ten, because that's been the only benefit so far for being that league.
I have another room temperature take that is tangentially related to Nebraska, and this is me. I get a little more heated on this one, Max, than most.
Okay.
The all caps press releases have got to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Nebraska did this last week when Trev Alberts announced that he was keeping Fred Hoiberg, the men's basketball coach.
Mm-hmm.
And so they put out the 2 press releases, one with a quote from Trev Alberts, one with a quote from Fred Hoiberg, both of them in all caps, both completely unreadable. And then on Monday, you get the tour de force from Kyler Murray's agent, Eric Burkhart.
Yes.
With the Kyler Murray letterhead, which, by the way, I've created a nice blank template with Kyler Murray letterhead. You can find it on my Twitter feed if you'd like to create your own Kyler Murray announcements. But maybe like 9-point font, all caps, manifesto. Basically, Kyler saying, I would like.
Oh, it wasn't Kyler. It was definitely Eric saying all this. Yeah.
Well, it said, but Kyler wanted to be direct, and Kyler's version of being direct apparently is having his agent put out a press release under his agent's name. It was quite the manifesto. Basically, I did try to read it in spite of it being in all caps and very small font. He's got 2 more years. He's on a rookie contract. He's a first-round draft pick. The Cardinals have, obviously, the 5th-year option. Unlike most quarterbacks on a rookie contract, he was the 5th overall pick in the Major League Draft. And assuming the lockout ever ends, that does provide some leverage that most other QBs on a rookie contract don't have. So maybe he can get himself paid. But I submit he would have garnered more favor had that press release been about a quarter as long, and included lowercase letters.
Now that thing was classic, TLDR, but I did read it all. And I will say, I think that typography in this case really matters. And I think people, certainly I saw lots of these, the folks in college football who, work in the graphics and creative departments now, sharing this and sharing that concern. And they're right. I think that it's fun to make cool looking things, but it's got to be readable.
Here's my thing. I have never taken a graphic design class.
Most
of us haven't.
But
we all read things.
Sure.
And things in all caps are unreadable, especially when they're in a 9-point font.
Yeah.
This is not complicated.
Also, there's just that Twitter thing, too, where it's like I had to open that from TweetDeck onto regular Twitter and then blow it up and then zoom in.
Meanwhile, Derek Jeter announces his separation from the Marlins with like a 3-paragraph statement on a blank white background that includes capital letters and lowercase letters in grammatically correct fashion. That's the way to do it. Listen, if you're going to do it, keep it short and sweet, and capital letters and lowercase letters, just like your kindergarten teacher taught you. That's all you need to know.
I agree. There's nothing warm about that. That's just really good, solid reasoning right there.
Solid business sense.
Yes, sir.
All right, Max, speaking of business sense, you mentioned that you have a room temperature take about these NIL collectives that I had David Ubbett on last week to break all that down. And he, the one that is, I got to make sure I get the wording right. The one that is Tennessee centric guided him through the process. And basically, you got to have like a $10 million pool if you even want to come close to competing.
Yeah, I got something to say on the collectives, and I'm not sure if people are ready to hear it, but here we go. I think collectives are fine. They're fine.
What? They're not the downfall of everything, and they're not the greatest thing that ever happened?
I think they're somewhere in the middle there. I think well, first of all, Andy, I mean, let's be honest here. There's okay, let me go back to one of your old takes from a couple years ago, right? And I'm sure you would probably amend the take over time here. I remember you used to say that the transfer portal stuff, we always had transfers. Now we just have a website for it, right?
That's
it's
true.
not that big a deal. Now it's a little bit bigger deal now, but I think that was
they changed the eligibility rules. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I think that that amount of money makes sense. I think people probably in that conference have organized before to provide large sums of money to players. And now we're just kind of doing it more publicly. So that doesn't really offend me. I think if anything, the unregulated nature of it is like slightly concerning. I mean, Andy, do you know what's a reasonable, like if they're going to raise this much money, like what's a reasonable amount of overhead there that they should be paying themselves?
That's a good question.
Because at what point does that kind of like turn into fraud where they're just kind of doing this because they can I'm not saying that specifically the Tennessee Collective. I'm saying in general,
I know what you're saying.
People that are looking at this landscape and saying, man, there's a real opportunity here.
Yeah. And this has actually always been one of my big problems with college sports. Too many middlemen.
Yeah.
I don't like that all of the rules and then the workarounds around the rules and because they can't just make them employees, which obviously I realize there are rules governing that too. Yeah. You get into government, you get into state laws, you get into federal laws, all that stuff. But every sort of ad hoc thing they do in college sports feels like it creates more middlemen. Now,
maybe you'd feel worse about this, but I'm curious. Would you feel better about the concept of collectives if they moved in-house?
Probably, because it just takes them. Now, there still would be someone administrating it, but
yeah,
you're hiring the administrator, probably based on what the market wants.
I mean, as an athletic department, you already hire people for fundraising.
Correct. So you probably just shift somebody over. It's sort of like how the recruiting departments they've shifted people from focusing on high school players to focusing on players that are in college. You would do the same thing with your development arm of your athletic department. Mm-hmm. So now, but again, you do that, they're employees, and then you're dealing with a whole new camp. But I think they're gonna get to that point. They're just, and I'll be honest with you, given the language of that Supreme Court ruling, I don't know that there are any rules that the schools can create at this point to really rein this in. I know they want a federal law. I'm not sure they're going to get one, especially not one that they want right now with this Congress. So it may be that they have to wait till the players are basically employees or officially employees and just bargain with them. Because if you got a CBA, well, labor can't sue you because they agreed to this.
Yeah,
so
I think that's well said. And I think the other part of the collectives deal, so like I definitely, and look, my point earlier is that these guys are like these people putting these together are not just like doing it out of the goodness of their hearts or to be, win championships. Yeah. There's also, because there's a lot of money that can be made on this. And I hope that stuff's being handled appropriately and not like, for example, a foundation run by Hugh Jackson. So the other part of that I the other part
may
of
or may not have admitted to a crime on Twitter today. I don't know.
People doing tax fraud on Twitter. What a time we're living in, Andy. Or not. I don't know. Maybe not. The other part of that. Okay, so let's so if you're Tennessee, just for example here, or say you are a historically top 25 program that you want to be a top 10 program or top 5 program, right?
Yeah.
You can. The thing that like where I just feel like this stuff is just fine is, so like we just saw what it looks like if like Tennessee recruits at a top 10 level under Jeremy Pruitt, right?
Yes.
And we saw the fallout of that. Those players didn't stay. The coach got fired. There's we'll see what the fault.
There was no cohesion to what they were recruiting. They were
right. The on-field
kind of
success
grabbing
didn't
stars
happen
instead of actually creating a team.
Right. Yeah. And we'll see if there's ever any like legitimate, NCAA fallout for all of that someday. But there's a part of this to me where it's like, I think it's, I have absolutely no problem with the student athletes making as much as they can. And I don't really get that offended by the idea that this is obviously pay for play. And it's obviously like, we are using this to recruit student athletes, which is of course against the whole intent of this, right? My take would be, if you go out and buy the best players you can buy, if you suck at evaluating and developing them, you're still going to suck.
Still going to suck. Exactly. That's what I keep telling people that. And this is where the OKG thing comes in. Like the people who are good evaluators are, but Ari and I discussed this the other day. Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Dabo Sweeney, great evaluators too.
Yeah.
Really good.
They hit a lot more than they miss. And it's not just because, organizationally they're successful in sort of developing the player. But I mean, if you want to say, all those schools were already paying for players and stuff, well, guess what? They're paying for very, very good players. And they know what to do with them, and they hold on to them, and they turn them into pros. So I that part of it, I'm fascinated to see, are there going to be programs that rise up and suddenly recruit at that top 10 level or top 15 level that you would think like, oh, they shouldn't be doing that. But as we saw with Tennessee under Pruitt, like, you have to keep those players on your campus and you have to actually win with them, or else you will get fired.
Correct.
And if anything, if you're kind of blowing it,
it's going to be worse than anything else.
And if people are investing that much money in your roster building and then you suck, you're going to get fired.
And they're going to stop investing. They're not
100%.
I realize everybody thinks that there's this money tree that people just keep plucking from to give. There's not.
No.
Eventually, these rich people are they'll continue to invest when they feel like they're getting a return on the investment. And look, I don't necessarily mean they get money out of it. I mean, they get the thing they want, which in some cases is a winning team. Some cases it's influence. It's, they have different reasons for doing it. But if they don't get the thing they want, and ultimately that probably is a winning team, they're probably stopping, or they're going to withhold until changes are made to try to get what they want. So I'm with you on that. You also mentioned you had a room temperature take on Oklahoma, and I do think, because I've gotten a few questions about this in Dear Andy that I haven't really. I've answered a couple of them, but I feel like I get one every week saying, "Oh, you guys have just decided Oklahoma stinks now," and I'm like, "What? When did we ever say that?"
Yeah, I don't think that. And I would say I'm pretty optimistic about where they're going. I wouldn't say that they are on the whole better off without Lincoln Riley. I don't know. And that's,
I know that's what Oklahoma fans want to believe, because they're mad at Lincoln Riley for what he did.
Sure. Absolutely. And this is all part of the breakup. And I totally get that. I think Oklahoma has a chance to be, as good as they've been under Brent Venables. I would be surprised if they fell off. That being said, I think that I think Oklahoma's going to be fine. That would be my room temp take on Oklahoma.
I'm with you,
and especially if they're staying in the Big 12 through the end of 24, which they might be. They're probably going to be pretty successful here over the next few years.
Well, and let me add to that. So the next logical step is what happens when they get to the SEC. Well, Brent Venables has been recruiting against the best programs in the SEC for the past 10 years and has been successful at it. Not many people can go against Georgia or Alabama or Ohio State, and not in the SEC, but a great recruiting program, and get the guy that you're trying to get. But Brent Venables has been successful doing that. So I actually think he may be, from a practical standpoint, a better choice to lead them into the SEC. Now, Lincoln Riley gets good players too. He certainly gets great quarterback prospects, but when's he going to get a 5-star D tackle? When's he going to get the offensive line, that raw material? Because obviously Bill Beanbo did a great job building up what they had. And by the way, he's still at Oklahoma building up their offensive linemen. And Brent Venables, probably has a pretty good idea of what they'll be seeing
Yeah.
When they
I
get
think
to
Todd
the
Bates
SEC.
has got a pretty good track record too on D linemen.
Just teeny bit. That 2018 D line was okay.
Yeah. I think the thing that I would be more concerned about long term is really the SEC more than the head coaching thing if I were an Oklahoma fan. Because I think that if I were to like go, right down the middle here, I would say that it's probably reasonable, given that we have a little bit of evidence to go on here. It's probably reasonable for an Oklahoma or Texas fan to fear, we might be like an 8-4 program for a few years in the SEC or 5 years, right? And if certainly right now, if Texas would love to be 8 wins consistently, and
they'll take 8-4.
I don't mean to totally lump them together like that, but it's possible because we saw it with A&M. It's possible you can take that and say maybe there's going to be a little bit of a ceiling here when you start off. It just as you make this transition and you have to figure out what it takes to recruit to that school and all that. I think it's reasonable to maybe kind of have that concern. Now, obviously, Oklahoma's been a lot more successful over the last decade than A&M was in their decade before they went to the SEC. So I think you still feel a little bit better about that, but there's going to be a reality check to that change.
Yeah.
That's true of changing conferences anytime. That's not really a statement about the staff.
Yeah. Oklahoma has been a pretty well-run program for a long time. Mm-hmm. And, they won in the Big 8. They won in the Big 12. I think they will eventually win in the SEC. I don't know if it'll happen right away, but they've been one of the steady. The 90s were that weird down period for them. But other than that, historically, they just really aren't ever down. And I think that means something. I think competent. It's sort of like pro sports with competent ownership. Like the Steelers are never going to be really bad because they're competently run. The Cardinals may never actually be all that good because they're not as competently run.
I guess the one counter to that I think
the
of
Jaguars, maybe that was better.
Well, no, I would just say that I think the one counter to that would be you'd say, well, what about Texas after Mack and DeLoss? Like if you were to take if you took Joe C out of the equation at Oklahoma, like sure it could get like chaotic like we saw from Texas over the last decade.
It's true. I mean, with Texas. I look at Mack and Pete Carroll kind of in the same vein, where Mack at Texas, Pete Carroll at USC produced an era that really the years around it don't match, and it may just be that guy was special.
Yeah.
Oklahoma now it may just be that Bob Stoops and Lincoln Riley together are special, or it may be that Oklahoma is kind of built to succeed, no matter who's in there.
That certainly could be. I just when you make that one false step like Steve Patterson over Oliver Luck, then things can kind of veer off the road for ultimately quite a while. So that part, if you have that stability at Oklahoma, long term continue, then yeah, absolutely they're going to be fine. But that's not what people want to hear. They either want to hear that Oklahoma is going to win national championships under Venables, or that Venables is going to be fired in a year or two. So we're just going to have to pick the middle there.
Somewhere in the middle, and that is where the truth usually lies. Very intrigued when you sent me your list to hear what your room temperature McDonald's take is, because first of all, I don't want room temperature McDonald's.
No,
I'm not sure how much McDonald's I'm having anyway, but certainly not at room temperature. But what are we talking about here?
I just want to say, like we don't get McDonald's that frequently. The last 2 trips we've had to McDonald's have been excellent.
Really?
Excellent. And I would say
Airlane and see on the app or something.
So no, just drive through. Had good fortune. It could be the locations I'm going to, and there's a big variance in terms of what are you getting depending on which location you go to. Around this great country. But my take would be McDonald's is good.
Wow. All right. That's good to hear, because it's one of those things.
I'm a little afraid Ari's going to drop in and yell at me for a half hour just because I said that out loud on your podcast.
How could you think it was ever not good?
It's better than In-N-Out. What the hell are you talking about?
Well, no,
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's good.
I will say, if you want to be fascinated by something involving McDonald's, because we've all experienced the just crushing despair of going to McDonald's to get that vanilla ice cream cone, which is delightful, by the way. Yeah. I don't care what McDonald's you're at, where you are, that thing is delightful. but the machine is broken most of the time. And when you get to the front of the line, you order it and they say, no, the machine's broken. It is just heart destroying. There's a great story in Wired. I think it came out in 2020. Might have come out last year, about why the McDonald's ice cream machines are always broken. It is fascinating. It's just an amazing business. Like,
remember, wasn't there a website that tracks them constantly on which ones are?
Yes. And somebody created a machine to hack them and keep them working, and then the company that makes them went after those people. It's an incredibly twisted story, and I just want my ice cream, and it just made me mad reading it. But it was absolutely fascinating.
I just like the last 2 trips I've had quarter pounder with cheese, very crispy fries.
Yep.
Great. Obviously, the pop there is better than you get anywhere else. Most other places. I think that's a whole other conversation.
For the Southerners, Max talking about Coke.
Well, yeah. I think that there's certain places, Chick-fil-A and McDonald's, kind of that upper tier of soft drink. It's just better there than it's at other places. Yeah.
That is true.
My wife's McNuggets have just been on point. I want to give them their credit. What's your relationship to McDonald's though?
I love the fries.
I mean, obviously you've lost a lot of weight, so you haven't been there much lately. I'm not
eating a ton of fast food. If we do eat fast food, it's usually Chick-fil-A, but a lot of times I get it for the kids, and I'm not even having it anymore because those fries. If I get one of those waffle fries, I want to order like 3 larges, and so it's probably best if I just avoid them altogether. But no, McDonald's, I love McDonald's breakfast. I love Egg McMuffins, bacon, egg, and cheese.
I'm not the biggest McGriddle guy.
I am not. I'm not
trying to take that away from anybody. If you love them, then good for you.
Yeah, it's not my thing. But I'd much rather go to breakfast at McDonald's than lunch or dinner. That would be my choice.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm fine with it. I don't think it stinks or anything like that. It's usually not my first choice, but it's one of those things where a big battleship, like, aircraft carrier like that, when they've kind of gone one direction and maybe can turn around, like Domino's did that a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'd gotten, had some bad experiences with Domino's like 15 years ago and just stopped eating it. And then you start going to like kids' birthday parties and stuff, and they change the recipes, and you eat it and you're like, oh, this is kind of good. And we ended up ordering from them quite a bit for a period because they got a lot better and they clearly were working at it. So,
in college, it was Burger King over McDonald's for us. I was in college from 08 to 11. Okay. Or end of 11. It was BK, and I would love to read the story about what the hell has happened to Burger King over the last decade.
I loved Burger King as a kid. That was it. It was more for just convenience for me because there was a Burger King about a mile from where I lived, and so it was just easy for us to stop there and get. But I love just the regular hamburger from Burger King. I would eat tons of those as a kid. It was awesome, and I just have no desire to. It doesn't.
I don't know what happened there. They've
tried the fries in every conceivable iteration and can't seem to get that right.
It seems like they have no idea what their brand is at this point. It's very confusing and just
it's a guy in a really big.
Hope they don't sponsor the podcast. I guess I should have asked about that.
Well, they won't now. But McDonald's may come aboard. That'd be fine.
That'd be fine.
All right, I have another.
Yeah, let's get into yours. What do you got?
So this is actually a little along the lines of McDonald's just doing the quarter pounder and cheese and the fries right and continuing to do them right year after year after year. With musicians, a lot of times they get late career and they want to get away from everything that made them popular in the first place, or they want to evolve as artists. I want to give praise to someone who is like, you know what? I'm going to make an album exactly like the one that made me famous. Avril Lavigne put out an album on Friday.
Wow.
It's called Love Sucks. She spelled sucks, S-U-X. She has been married and divorced from 2 different lead singers, the dude from Sum 41 and the dude from Nickelback. It's very, a lot of breakup album-ish stuff in there, although the breakup apparently occurred a while back, according to what I read.
What was the most recent breakup? I haven't followed her.
I think the Chad Kroeger from Nickelback, that was like 2015.
Okay.
That was when that happened. And apparently the very amicable split too. But what did Avril Lavigne
they've
get
looked at a lot of
for?
photographs since that divorce. That's tough.
Yeah. Avril Lavigne made really hooky, just earwormy, big hooks, driving electric guitars, her yelling at guys. That is what this album is. It is an entire album of her yelling at guys. There's one where she and Machine Gun Kelly basically yell at each other. It's fantastic. It is tremendous. Stuart Mandel and I were texting each other on Friday about it. And look, you call me a
I wouldn't have picked Stu for an Avril Lavigne guy.
Oh, Stu's a big pop punk guy. Loves pop punk, and Avril Lavigne was a pop punk artist. Every bit the pop punk artist that Blink 182 or that Sum 41 or any of those were. So I just appreciate that. Like, sometimes you got to lean into what you're really good at. Like, sometimes I need to talk about ribs because I like talking about ribs. People seem to enjoy me talking about ribs. Avril Lavigne needs to, sing a very catchy hook where she yells at a dude over a very not super creative, but very memorable guitar riff. That's all we need. That's it.
Yes, I totally agree. I think that I think I'm reaching the age now, and I'm guessing you don't even ever pop into this, but like when you go on Spotify, do you ever go look at the charts and what like the top songs are on the charts?
I do.
I increasingly don't know any of these songs.
It's bad time for music right now.
Or I'm getting older. It's also that. And there's definitely a lot of artists that are probably looking at the charts and saying like, I can make this kind of music. Let's go in this direction. This is what people like right now. And that kind of bums me out sometimes when you just kind of try to chase the wave. I'm with you, man.
Well, here's a song that was sort of unstuck in time that it probably was created 20 years too late, or actually probably 25 years too late, that I recently heard. So have you watched Peacemaker on HBO Max yet?
No, I haven't. Is it
okay? This is the John Cena show.
Yeah,
it's the character.
I did see the Suicide Squad.
Yeah. Okay. So he plays that character again. The opening title sequence of that show is the most electrifying opening title sequence since the A-Team. The song that plays...
Well, I mean, I don't know. The Succession theme kind of gets me, but keep going.
The song that plays during that title sequence is Do You Want to Taste It by a group called Wigwam. So the entire playlist of the series, the kind of musical character of the series is hair metal. But this is a hair metal song that was created in 2010.
Interesting.
So these guys, I never heard of them. Maybe they've got a dedicated audience that, still was rocking out in 2010 to hair metal. But I feel like it's one of those things where this is so much better than anything that's on the charts right now. And all it is basically an homage to Motley Crue or Warren or Dokken or all the, but they actually play instruments and sing in harmonies and like none of the things that are popular now.
Now, are you where do you stand on the did Avril Lavigne die thing? Do you believe that it is?
I heard the album.
No, there's kind of an old internet thing that she passed away and was replaced by doppelganger Avril Lavigne. Do you think that's true?
No, I don't.
I think that's probably not true.
It's not like Journey finding the dude that sounded exactly like Steve Perry and looks nothing like him.
Yeah, I generally don't buy that. I'll have to listen to this Avril Lavigne.
If it's an Avril Lavigne robot, I'm willing to listen. And I will say, having heard the album, remarkably good programming if she's a robot.
Okay.
She sounds like the real thing. But I'm pretty sure it's just her. She's okay. And she knows where her bread is buttered, and that is angsty.
Is this good
guitar-driven pop?
Is this good running or workout music for you or something?
Oh yeah. I mean,
okay.
It's if you're a 17-year-old girl or me.
Okay. I will give this a try. I took last week off and I caught up on something that was on my to-do list for a long time. And that is I watched the 8-hour Beatles Get Back documentary on Disney Plus.
I started it and then had to go do something, and so I was only like 10 minutes into it. That's one of those I'm going to save till I can really binge it, because that
let me tell you something.
Cool.
Room temperature take, Andy. Beatles still amazing.
Still good.
Still good. Still got it. Still holds up. I mean, the whole doc is. I mean, for like you and I and the folks in our business will love it, because it's. I mean, it's just you get to watch all of this footage and really find all these
access is amazing. It looks
the
incredible.
Access is unbelievable. Just there's all these mundane moments that are just so telling about why they broke up and where they were at that point in their careers as they were about to go their separate ways. And I mean, they're making the music of the Let It Be album and the Abbey Road album, basically. So it's like, I mean, it's
that's the thing that blows my mind, is all those hits. And it's one of those things where, especially if you're younger than 35 or 30, unless you are, your parents were really big in it, but even your parents wouldn't have been alive for a lot of that. Like, my parents were teenagers when the Beatles were popular, so it was kind of right in their sweet spot. But all of that was done over like a 6 or 7 year period. And there's so many hits, and you're like, oh my God, they did that one too. And that one, that's also a Beatles song. And look, Help sounds nothing like Happiness Is a Warm Gun.
Mm-hmm.
But they did it all.
And this was, and part of the clash within this is they're starting to figure out that George Harrison wants to make different music than Paul McCartney, and John Lennon wants to make music. They want to go off and do their own stuff. And it's just watching them make up music out of, from scratch and improve it over time. It's unbelievable. The Beatles are good. That's a take.
One of my favorite Chuck Klosterman essays, and it is in keeping with the theme of this podcast. If you get a chance, it's on the internet still. The most accurately rated bands of all time. I believe he has the Beatles as the 4th most accurately rated band of all time. Spoiler alert, number 1 is Van Halen, because Klosterman posits that And the Cradle Will Rock is the dead middle, the 50th percentile of music. That song.
50th percentile. I like that. That is an extremely Chuck Klosterman topic there. I like that.
It's tremendous. Well, Max, it has been a pleasure. We need to refill the room temperature take tank, but next time
did you hear anything that offended you on this podcast? Anything that maybe rolled your eyes and say, Ari and I are going to actually get into this in our next one?
Absolutely not. I think Ari's going to be pleased that now Ari may be mad that you did not praise the filet of fish in your McDonald's praise, because that is his preferred dish. But
I think I can say I've never ordered a filet of fish in my life.
I just obviously haven't done it in a while, but back when I did, no tartar sauce.
Mm-hmm.
Might dip it a little ketchup.
Is it weird to say, like, when I look at a picture of a filet of fish, I would say, like, I would take the cheese off? Or does the cheese add a lot?
I don't think the cheese adds that much. I think if you feel like you don't need cheese with
if
your
I
fish,
want it like chicken sandwich style, like if I just want, I think that
actually
probably
with a pickle
would be good.
on it, bun pickle fish bun might be a good way to go.
Probably so.
So, I don't think any feelings were hurt in the making of this podcast, and I'm glad for that.
All right, next time you have Ari on, ask him about the greatness of Phoenix, Arizona, because this is something that I just had to see a whole day of text messages about that from him. He was going to war defending the honor of Phoenix, Arizona. So tee him off on that one.
I listen. I don't need to
David Ubben,
Ari off.
Phoenix hater. So
I
don't know where
that fuse lights itself.
Where are you on Phoenix?
I'm a huge fan.
Or con?
Huge fan.
Okay.
Like Scottsdale, like Gilbert, I like Perry.
Mm-hmm.
Not as big on Glendale.
Okay.
Love Tempe.
I haven't been to the stadium at Glendale still. Or the Camelback.
It's a giant Hershey kiss. The Camelback is not as great as everybody thinks.
Uh-huh.
The Marriott at Buttes.
Okay.
Very nice.
I haven't spent enough time in it to have to
personally.
Be hot on this, so I would say I think Phoenix is good.
I would just want to be at one of those places in Old Town Scottsdale and be able to walk to the bars and some really great breakfast places along Scottsdale Road. So listen, I'm a huge
I believe
fan.
you took me to Pizzeria Bianca there one time too.
Pizzeria Bianca is excellent. Tacos Chihuas is one of my favorite. Little Miss Barbecue, one of the best barbecue places in the country. It's a great town. It's
Phoenix
fantastic.
is good. There we go.
So there you go. We will not offend Phoenix either. Now I'll let Ari defend Phoenix all he wants when he comes back. Max, it has been a pleasure. I'm so glad we could work this in between naps.
That's right, man.